Also with us this afternoon is Gary Greenberg. Gary is the Executive Director for IT Teaching and Research Initiatives at Northwestern University. Gary is also the Director of the Collaboratory Project, a web-based collaborative environment that teachers use to develop innovative project-based activities that are aligned to learning standards. Before we begin the conversation with Helen, Tom, and Gary, I again invite our viewing audiences to send us your questions via our toll-free number or email. So, Gary, we've heard a little bit about Washington, we've heard a little bit about Stanford. Tell us a bit about the collaboratory project that you're doing and how that plays to ePortfolios.
Well, I think one of the things, Casey, that's different is that our focus is on K-12 education. We're funded by the Illinois State Board of Education. The collaboratory is an easy-to-use, web-based collaborative learning environment that we've created for the state. It incorporates a suite of communication services like messaging, conferencing, discussion forums that support collaboration. We also have a suite of resources that support online virtual libraries of internet resources, publishing text, graphic, sound, and video, doing online surveys. Our ePortfolio is our newest resource. And the idea around the ePortfolio is, first of all, everyone in the collaboratory has a portfolio. Teachers create portfolios for their students with binders around subject areas. Those subject area binders then have folders in them, and students use documents that are custom designed by us for the specific curricular application. It could be a newspaper, it could be a research template, or so on. What's also different about our portfolio is that this is not a place to collect archives after the fact. We provide a workspace within which students actually work on their documents. We also have a suite of communication tools for collaboration to provide comments, discussion forums, feedback, and reflection, and we can attach these in different ways. So for example, when a student is working on a project, it may be that only the teacher and the student are talking with each other about the evolution of that project. Once the project is at a point for broader interest and discussion, it becomes open to the class. The class can then have discussions, provide feedback for each other. When they're ready, they can then go and publish this to the general public so parents can see it, people on the school board can see the wonderful things that are happening in a class.
But when you talk about students, you're not obviously talking about elementary school students. Are you talking mostly about high school students, middle school students as the participants in the ePortfolio aspect of the collaboratory?
This is everything from kindergarten through 12th grade. Everything that we do is a general purpose tool. A kindergarten class using our resources to study dinosaurs uses exactly the same resources as a high school AP Physics class studying thermodynamics.
Well, let's talk about that high school AP Physics class for a moment. Does that mean that students that are part of the collaboratory who are developing these ePortfolios, are those documents, let me ask the dumb question, as a parent of both a high school student and a college student, does that mean that that material is now being at least viewed and potentially accepted by college admissions officers in colleges across the country or at some institutions?
Well, it's really up to the owner of the portfolio and the folders how public they want to make things. So again, this could be shared within the class or the school, or it can be public. Each student can have their own public publication as a type of gallery that they could create for a university, for a job, or whatever they choose.
So some of the same issues that Helen talked about in terms of the public aspects and the private aspects at Stanford and the reflective aspects also play out in the project that you're doing at Northwestern. And Tom, how does that, similarities or differences with some of the work you're doing at Washington?
Well, Gary's tool and what he's talked about, there's a very specific set of purposes. What we've built, we sometimes joke that it's a very big, stupid tool, meaning it allows different people, both students, faculty, advisors, counselors, to do different things with the tool. Students can simply collect things and publish it on their own if they want to, as they make their way through the university. But one of the most interesting aspects of the tool is the ability for what we call experts, but who are really faculty, again, advisors or counselors, to sort of create a portfolio experience that they can interact with students on a one-to-one basis as the students populate the portfolio with various artifacts that demonstrate their learning or demonstrate outcomes or products that they'd like to show an employer. And the cool thing is the portfolio also houses the communication, the back and forth between the expert and the student. And the student can take that communication and anything they've assembled in any portfolio and display it in other portfolios. So it's very flexible and can be used in a lot of different ways.
Helen, how does some of this play with the longitudinal work you've done at Stanford, and particularly in the area of the faculty role and the faculty involvement in the development, the structure, the aggregation, if you will? I'm not sure that's the right term, of that student portfolio.
Right. Well, Tom, what you were saying, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, we're looking to give students structured opportunities to create portfolios as well as to motivate them to capture and document document their experiences so that they can tell a story about their learning. So exactly the kind of experience that you're talking about fits very well with our research, and then the kinds of tools that Gary's developing, I think, again, trying to support works in progress and provide opportunity for feedback.
I think one of the things that we're all doing is supporting a lot of the informal types of learning and interactions that happen that typically disappear. When someone asks a question of a professor about the work that they're doing, or if there are comments on a draft, all of that stuff usually gets thrown out. And I think as people move to electronic documents, faculty have had the problem with, how do I comment on students' work and a work in progress? And I think one of the things that the ePortfolio projects are doing is providing an environment where that can happen. Well, the outcome is that all of that stuff, all of that process now becomes available, whether it's an interesting archive that you want to use as part of your assessment, or it's something that you're going to look back on and reflect upon to help you with whatever your next challenge might be.
Is it more difficult to get students interested or more difficult to encourage faculty to participate? Helen, again, let's draw on your longitudinal research to start.
I think it's very easy to sell students on the idea of keeping an electronic portfolio. However, really motivating them and getting them to commit to actually choose to put things into their portfolio when they have exams and they have papers due the next day. But I know that, Tom, you're experimenting, the work that you're doing now, actually could speak more to that.
Yeah, we were actually pleasantly surprised that there was such great and immediate student interest in what we were doing, because we had an idea, but we didn't necessarily have all the funding we needed to build the tool. And the Student Technology Fee Committee funded a large part of the development. And now about 80% of our freshman class are using the portfolio in one of the courses they take in their first quarter that helps them sort of tie together what they did in high school, what they're thinking and feeling now that they're in college.
So they get a structured introduction through that kind of a class. And Gary, what about?
Well, I was also going to say that Tom's experience is very interesting because what it's saying is that students who are growing up in the electronic age who, unlike us, maybe had all of their papers scattered around the room and toys and things, a lot of what they're working on is electronic. And as they come into college, they're saying, I have a problem. I have all this stuff that I'm doing, all this stuff that I'm interested in. How do I bring it together in some form that I can carry with me, that I can show my friends? And so in some ways, this willingness to take your technology fee and invest in you, I think really demonstrates that these students have some sort of vague vision, and being able to partner with them is just very exciting.
Yeah, but what about folks like me, middle-aged, mid-career faculty? I mean, I may view that all the stuff that I've accumulated over the years may be dynamic, but I'm not used to dealing with students dynamically in the sense of the interaction back and forth. You hand me a paper, I send it back to you, that's kind of the end of it. We have the sense of time is marked by the end of the term. And that kind of ongoing relationship that you're talking about that seems to be implicit if, in fact, we're committed to an electronic portfolio in my department, with my students, with my majors, with my advisees. What's the faculty side of this? Do you have to cajole faculty? Do you encourage? There will always be that group, of course, that will do it. But for the rest of us, where this is a different way of working, where it may add to our sense of time commitments, I've already got plenty to do. And Helen, like you said, with the students, we've got to sustain their motivation. How do you, again, initiate and sustain the engagement of faculty with this at different levels? Because you're talking about almost three different universes in one sense.
A colleague of mine always makes this joke that technology is the Trojan mouse. So we try to give students at the University of Washington access to technology. They use it, and then they begin to pester and ask for it in their courses. And so once a faculty person uses one of the tools in our suite of tools, they'll tend to use another one. And the Trojan mouse aspect is that to use a tool well, they have to start thinking about learning outcomes. And the more they interact, the more they do that.
And some of the high schools and middle schools where you're working, Gary?
Well, I was going to say, it's sort of like guerrilla warfare, that when faculty often can't, and high school teachers and so on, may not be able to think about a portfolio beyond this thing that looks like it's in a folder with stuff inside of it. And we really have to give the opportunity for it to be around for the students to work with, in some ways to surprise the teacher, to surprise the instructor, to see what the possibilities are. So I think this is going to be an iterative process where we start seeing steps forward, but hopefully steps in very surprising examples. And a lot of this has to do with empowering students to take the materials and make it into something, the teacher being responsive to that and incorporating that the next time the course is being taught.
And Helen, in the longitudinal research that you did, were there some of that focus on faculty in terms of their reaction, particularly from, say, point A, early origins, to where they are today? Some of the response to faculty over time?
Well, our focus was still mainly on the students. However, right now we're really exploring into how we might bring faculty into the picture, because they obviously do play an important role in students' experiences.
But in each of the situations that you're in, though, with all due respect, they're kind of pilot projects, rarefied air, if you will. You know, how do we diffuse that? How do we take that from Washington, Stanford, Northwestern, and the projects that you're working with for the rest of us? I mean, clearly an issue as the conversation about e-portfolios moves beyond these pilot projects. Tom?
One thing we do that's very planful is we study effective pedagogical uses of the tools that we build, and we're doing the same thing with portfolios. So we can actually offer to the world, you know, after a year or so, here is what we've done. Here's what our faculty have done that have made the use of portfolios effective. And we also try to figure out ways, again from research, to make the process easier, so that there's less of a learning curve for faculty as they engage in these tools.
Yeah, we offer persistence, which means that stuff in the collaboratory that was done 4 or 5 years ago is still around. And I think if people go into an electronic portfolio and think, oh, it's only for this class, or maybe it'll be around for a year and then it's going to be gone, do I want to invest this time? But the notion of doing something that actually you can build and create and model in ways that are personally interesting, and it's going to be around for many years, even in many cases after you graduate, I think means that we're going to be moving in some very interesting directions.
All right, well,